Greg, if we have a client and a law firm, you're in the middle trying to make it work.
I'm trying to help be a catalyst for change, and I think all of you that are here today obviously are interested in the topic, and it's one that you should be excited about, because as the Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times. Well, you're in those interesting times if you're in the legal industry, whether you're a customer or a supplier. And those interesting times provide tremendous opportunity to take advantage of new ways of doing business. I think information technology, as it's evolved certainly through the 90s and into the 2000s, has begun to give us the ability to call into question, how do we communicate, how do we do our work in a professional services setting. There's different things that have really worked well when we've worked with a firm getting into alternative fee arrangements. Holly and Chris both hit on the communication aspect. It's sometimes not taken for the type of attention that it deserves. You know, we speak to each other quickly, we maybe shoot an email off with a typo, but the fact is, when you're getting into defining an alternative fee arrangement, you're really creating a structure of communication and understanding between you and your client and between you and the team that's working together. You mentioned the pressure that you felt as an associate to be able to satisfy the client but satisfy the firm. So in some ways, it wasn't that you just created some kind of technological solution to do AFA. It's about being all on the same understanding and expectation. And I think that starts with the client. How many people in the room are in sales? See, I'd argue you're all in sales. We're all selling something, right? Whether it's to your internal client or your external client. And I think that's one of the things that is going to have to kind of be recognized, and what will make things successful in alternative fee arrangements. In the past, it's the client says, hey, I have a need, let's start getting to work and we'll build that time. In order to do AFAs correctly, you need to spend time with the client up front, defining the expectations, really understanding what they need and how you're going to deliver it. So it's communication and it's sales. What we found in working together with a couple clients is that they'd never really thought about, well, what is our sales process? We give an engagement letter to a client and then we start billing time. Well, if we do something that short in an AFA arrangement, we end up in a situation where we underestimated it. Or as Holly said, we end up in a situation where the client is changing scope and there's no baseline of the original communication and sales engagement to say that really is a different scope. It's all left up to the interpretation. The client says, no, it really isn't. You just must have misunderstood me. Well, we didn't define it well enough. So communication, paying attention to the fact that there will be some pre-sales process in order to define what the scope of work is that next step. Several of you have mentioned in just conversations beforehand that you're starting to look at phase task type billing. So I think that's kind of the third step there is, okay, we're going to open up communication, we're going to pay attention to the sales process of working with an inside counsel about what they want, but then how do we define what it is we're going to do? And again, that definition is a standardization of communication. So I think thinking about that and being able to define what are the phase task concepts of the engagement you're going to do are fundamental to any kind of alternative fee arrangement, and usually one of the first points of focus, right? Let's go study the work we've done, let's break down what it is and how we do it.
It seems to me there's two perspectives here that could be interesting. One is your practice perspective, and the other sort of the LPM, low practice management perspective, and maybe you can...
Right, well, you know, it's interesting because so far the conversation has been about clients demanding alternative fee arrangements, and I came to it from a completely different perspective. I came to it from the frustration of dealing with the billable hour as a solo and the reality between billing and collection and what your actual realized hourly rate was. I mean, when you look at it on paper, my hourly rate sounds terrific, but when you look at it in terms of what happens when the retainer gets depleted, it really isn't so fabulous because you're in a constant battle with your clients trying to get them to replenish retainers. But really what happened with me was I just came to this gradually. When I graduated from law school, There were still bicycle couriers running all over downtown Boston. Fax machines were just coming into use. And back then, if we were writing a motion, I couldn't get 5 samples through my listserv. I actually had to come up with it myself. So the work took a lot longer. So I started to ask, why did it have more value back then than it does now? And why, if I can send an email and do something in 30 seconds, would I logically want to get on the telephone, because then I could charge more time? I mean, one of the funniest conversations I ever had with a client was when she was speaking as quickly as she possibly could, because she knew that I was billing by the hour. And I said to her, look, just slow down, I just take into account what we're talking about. And if we're talking about the Red Sox, I'm not going to charge for it. The other piece of it is I work mostly in the construction industry, and I start to look at how they bill. And in construction, you pitch a job, you do a very clear-cut scope of the work, and you issue a change order if that scope changes. And I finally realized that it made a lot more sense for me to charge the way my clients charge. So they weren't asking me to do this. And the other piece of it is I write a lot of contracts. So the first time I would write a contract, it might take me 10 hours. The second time I write a contract, it might take me 5 hours. And then the third time, it would take me 2 hours. So what I started to do before I realized that you could move away from billing by the hour was I would say to someone, you know what, I'm doing 3 contracts like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the amount of time I spend on all 3, and then I'm going to divide it evenly between the 3 of you, because it really doesn't make sense for me to charge person A 10 times more than person C. And when I started to say to the clients, look, just tell me what you want done, we'll create a scope of the work, and I'm going to charge you a flat fee, the relief that would come over their faces was incredible. And also, it made my life a whole lot more pleasant. I don't have to look at my watch. I don't have to, as a solo, I do everything. I wear all the hats. I used to have a partner, and I still wear all the hats. But, everything in my technology involved keeping track of every minute and keeping track of my billable time. And I can't tell you how much time it takes to keep track of your billable time. Now, I do things in the most efficient way possible. I mean, I have jobs where I've made $1,000 an hour. So if you look at it in terms of billable hour, none of it makes any sense. And the other piece of it that I'll just add right now is part of what brought this to the fore for me was my involvement in social media. And I started talking with people about it on Twitter and through some other venues as chair of the Law Practice Management Division Council. And it was recommended to me to read a book by a guy named Ronald Baker, who's actually the head of the Verisage Institute, where Christopher is involved, called The Professional's Guide to Value Pricing. It's 800 pages long. It is actually geared more towards accountants than lawyers. It is excellent. It's a little dry, dare I say that on camera, but it really helped to explain what approach you should use towards value pricing, and once you start doing it, you will never go back. We can talk about litigation later. Litigation's a lot harder.
But even in litigation, you're starting to see sort of fixed fee.
You can do it. You can say to someone, okay, I have fairly unsophisticated clients, so I have to explain the whole litigation process to them anyway. So I'll say, okay, the beginning, we're going to be doing a complaint, maybe a motion to attach real estate, so on and so forth. That's going to cost $5,000. Then the next stage is discovery. I can do one set of interrogatories, one set of requests for admissions, one deposition, so on and so forth for this amount. If we're going to need more, that's going to involve a change order.
Yeah.
So you can do it. You can break it down. The truth is, I think we lawyers might be a little bit lazy about it, and we don't want to do it. And plus, we're so afraid of losing money that we forget that by using the traditional billable hour, we've lost plenty of money.
Do you see more of that sort of discussion happening in the law practice management section, the journals, etc.?
Yeah, there's a small group of renegade people who are involved in it.
Let me ask, first of all, as we're closing the opening remarks, if there are any questions among the panelists that you want to address?
I thought it was interesting, Holly, you were describing that you've been doing alternative fee arrangements for 15 years, and what you're trying to find is what's the efficient back end to make sure you're running that so that they get the objective that you're trying to hit. What has it been like when you were doing it before you were studying the back end, and what has it been like as you've tried to now take apart the back end and make it fit the front end?
I guess it's a lot. It's a lot more efficient now that we're really trying to work on the back end. Because I guess one of the things nobody's really talked about is competition between, with other people who do similar things. So I'm in sort of a niche practice, and we are directly competing against other people who are giving these kinds of fee quotes or trying to do things for the same price. And one of our problems with scope creep is actually that other people are willing to do the same thing you're willing to do. They're willing to do more for the same price, and then it's hard to be competitive. So we have been sort of searching for technology advantages to deal with the competitiveness issues. So we've been working on the back end with trying to organize things a lot more online with open extranets, where they match like a client's closing checklist, and you can pretty much, as soon as the deal's over, burn closing binders and send them out and things, which clients care a lot about, is how quickly you can get some of those back end things done. And sometimes I think as lawyers, those get lost. So I think for us, really trying to focus on how we can make that process more efficient so that we can compete better has really been a focus recently. And it's just.
I'm sorry. You're also using extranets to keep that communication open with the client and share documents.
Yes, we're using extranets. We're using a document management system. We have used some really simple IT solutions, actually, like having client mailboxes and joint mailboxes so that teams of people who are working on things have access to the same information, so that people aren't inadvertently hoarding information, I guess. And some of those things have been really great. It's sort of like the $5 solution to a $100,000 problem. So that's been fantastic to find some of those easy solutions. And some of the other solutions, they're a lot harder. It's hard to get people to change how they do things internally, as well as sometimes your clients externally.
Kind of reminds me of the idea of maybe a parallel that at one point when you went to get money out of a bank, you'd go to a teller. Who would go to a teller today? It would be an inconvenient experience, right? So that moving to the ATM to make a client more self-sufficient actually increase the value for the client. So using extranets, tools that can help maybe make the client more self-sufficient, also takes some of the time off of what they were dependent on a person, and maybe allows the person to then think about the model of what they're delivering, so they're focusing on the value and a total service package that's a person and an extranet now.